I never imagined that a seemingly ordinary day in the heart of the jungle would plunge me into a surreal nightmare. As I walked along the familiar trails, the air thickened with an unsettling tension. The vibrant sounds of the forest, chirping, birds and rustling leaves, had faded into an eerie silence. My name is Paulo, a forest ranger who has devoted his life to safeguarding these magnificent woods. But today, something felt different. The first tremor rippled through the ground, sending a shiver up my spine. I paused, my instincts kicking in. The trees, once my sanctuary, now loomed above me like ancient sentinels, their shadows stretching ominously. I could smell the damp earth mixed with a hint of decay, and it made my stomach churn. The vibrant green of the leaves appeared muted, and the flowers, normally bursting with color, seemed to wilt in despair. As I pressed forward, a sense of dread enveloped me. The wildlife that typically thrived around me was gone. Even the smallest creatures had vanished. I had spent years learning the rhythms of this place, understanding its secrets, but now it felt as though I had trespassed into a realm where I didn't belong. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and I stumbled, my heart racing. I remembered my training, the countless hours spent learning about the flora and fauna, the delicate balance of life in the forest. But what could prepare me for this? The trees creaked as if whispering warnings, and a chill swept through the air, wrapping around me like a shroud. I had always respected this land, but now I felt an unseen force bearing down on me, demanding recognition. Then, from the depths of the jungle, I heard it, a low, haunting sound that resonated through the stillness. It was a call, deep and resonant, echoing through the trees and resonating within my very bones. I hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and an inexplicable urge to uncover the source of the sound. It was as if the forest was beckoning me, urging me to confront whatever darkness had awakened. As I moved closer to the sound, the ground quaked beneath me, and I stumbled into a clearing. There, illuminated by shafts of light breaking through the canopy, stood an ancient altar overgrown with vines and moss. Symbols etched into the stone pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I felt a surge of fear mixed with curiosity. "Who are you?" I whispered, half expecting a response from the shadows. The air crackled with tension, and I could feel the weight of the spirits watching me. I had always been a protector, a shield for this land, but now I felt exposed, vulnerable. Suddenly, the ground trembled once more, and I realized that my presence here might have disturbed something sleeping for centuries. "I am Paulo," I declared, my voice steady, despite the fear gnawing at me. "I am a guardian of these woods, and I seek to understand." But deep down, I knew I was not alone in this confrontation. An ancient spirit, awakened by my intrusion, awaited my next move. What price would I have to pay for my ignorance? The answers lay hidden within the whispers of the forest, and I was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. As I stood in the clearing, the ancient altar loomed before me, a testament to the secrets buried deep within the forest. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding upon something sacred. The sun flickered through the leaves, casting shadows that danced like specters at the edge of my vision. In my years as a ranger, I had encountered many people, each with their own complexities and contradictions. Take my mentor, Leo, for instance. He was a man of deep compassion, always the first to help a wounded animal or a lost traveler. But beneath that gentle exterior lay a relentless drive to control the forest, to bend it to his will. Sometimes, "Paulo, nature needs guidance," he would say, his eyes glinting with an intensity that made me question his motives. He believed he was the protector, but I often wondered if he sought to dominate. Then there was Mira, a local herbalist who lived on the outskirts of the forest. She was wise beyond her years, her knowledge of plants and their healing properties unparalleled. Yet there was a darkness within her, an unspoken pain that lingered in the corners of her smile. "The forest gives and takes," she once murmured, her gaze distant. "It heals, but it also demands. You must be prepared for both." Her words haunted me, especially now, as I felt the forest's pulse quickening around me. As I looked at the altar, I couldn't help but reflect on the universal themes that intertwined our lives: survival, sacrifice, and the eternal struggle between man and nature. Perhaps everything I had experienced was leading me to this moment where I would have to confront not just the spirit of the forest, but also my own beliefs. Would I stand firm in my convictions, or would I falter under the weight of expectation? The forest was alive with whispers, and I sensed that the very essence of it was woven into the fabric of our lives. The trees had seen generations come and go, and their roots held stories of triumph and tragedy. My role as a ranger had always been to protect these woods, but now I felt like a mere player on a stage far larger than I could comprehend. As I stepped closer to the altar, the sun dipped lower, casting an amber glow that illuminated the intricate carvings. They depicted scenes of harmony and conflict, a reminder of the delicate balance that existed within this ecosystem. I thought of the villagers who relied on the forest for their livelihood, the fishermen who cast their nets into the rivers, and the farmers who worked the land. Each of them held a piece of the puzzle, yet their relationship with nature was fraught with contradictions. I remembered a time when a drought had struck, and the villagers had turned to Leo for guidance. He had suggested cutting down the trees to create more farmland. "We need to adapt," he insisted, his voice rising above the murmurs of dissent. But I could see the fear in their eyes, the realization that they would be sacrificing their home for short-term gain. In that moment, I had felt torn between loyalty to my mentor and a growing understanding of the forest's true value. The forest was not just a resource. It was a living entity that deserved respect. I pondered whether I had the strength to stand against those who sought to exploit it. The thought of betrayal weighed heavily on my mind, and I wondered if I too would be tempted by the allure of power. Suddenly, a rustling in the underbrush caught my attention. I turned to find a figure emerging from the shadows, an old man with skin as weathered as the bark of the trees. His eyes sparkled with a mixture of wisdom and mischief, and I recognized him as Wira, a local shaman. He had lived in harmony with the forest for decades, yet I sensed his presence was both a blessing and a curse. "Ah, Paulo," he said, a grin breaking across his face. "You've come to commune with the spirits, have you?" His tone was teasing, but I could feel the weight of his words. "The forest has chosen you, but you must tread carefully. It is not just the spirits you must appease." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "There are forces at play here that you do not yet understand," Wira replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The balance is fragile, and your actions may tip the scales." I felt a surge of apprehension. Wira's warnings echoed Mira's sentiments, and I knew I had to be cautious. The forest demanded respect, but it also required humility. The stakes were higher than I had imagined, and the consequences of my choices could reverberate through generations. As I stood before the altar, I could sense the energy swirling around me, intertwining with my thoughts and fears. The forest was alive, and I was but a small part of its vast tapestry. I realized that my journey was not solely about facing the ancient spirit, it was also about understanding my place within this intricate web of life. In that moment, I felt a shift within me, a resolve to protect the forest from those who would exploit it. I would stand against the tide, for I had seen the beauty and the darkness that coexisted in this land. The forest had shaped my life, and now it was time for me to give back. Would I be strong enough to face the spirit and the challenges that lay ahead? The answer remained shrouded in uncertainty, but I was ready to embrace the journey. The whispers of the forest grew louder, urging me forward, and I stepped closer to the altar, prepared to confront whatever awaited me. As I stood before the ancient altar, the weight of the forest's energy pressed down on me. I felt the undeniable presence of the spirit, a force that demanded recognition and respect. It was clear that I was at a crossroads, where the choices I made would ripple through both my life and the lives of those connected to this land. The first dilemma arose as I recalled the warnings from Wira and Mira. They had both hinted at the delicate balance between man and nature, a balance I was now responsible for maintaining. My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. What if I had to choose between saving a part of the forest and the lives of the villagers who depended on it? The thought gnawed at me. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, shaking me from my thoughts. The forest was alive with agitation, and in that moment, I realized that the spirit would not wait for my indecision. I had to act, but the direction of my actions remained unclear. As I gathered my resolve, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. I turned to see Leo emerging from the underbrush, his face drawn and serious. "Paulo, you shouldn't be here alone," he warned, glancing nervously at the altar. "I sensed a disturbance in the forest. We need to leave." "Leave?" I echoed, my voice laced with disbelief. "This is where I need to be. The spirit is awake, and I can't just abandon it." Leo's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The spirit demands a sacrifice, and we both know it could mean the end of everything we've worked for." His words struck a chord within me. I had spent years learning from him, but now I felt an unsettling shift in our dynamic. His fear felt almost like desperation, as if he was projecting his own insecurities onto me. "What do you suggest we do?" I asked, feeling the weight of expectation settle on my shoulders. "We need to appease the spirit before it unleashes its wrath," Leo insisted. "There are those who would exploit this moment, and if we don't act quickly, it could lead to chaos." In that instant, I faced a moral dilemma of my own. Should I align with Leo, whose methods I no longer trusted, or should I pursue my own path, even if it meant defying him? The choice loomed large, and I felt the ground beneath me ripple with anticipation. "Leo, I can't just follow you blindly anymore," I said, my voice steady. "I need to understand what the spirit truly wants, not just what we think it needs." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of anger. "You're being reckless, Paulo. This isn't a game." Before I could respond, the forest erupted into chaos. The trees whispered warnings, and I felt a rush of air that sent leaves spiraling around us. From the shadows, figures emerged, villagers who had come to witness the disturbance. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and curiosity, and I realized that my actions had drawn them here. One of them, a young woman named Sari, stepped forward. "What's happening?" We felt the tremors. "Is the spirit angry?" Her voice trembled, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. I hesitated, knowing that my response could shape their perception of the situation. "The spirit has awakened, and it's demanding our attention," I explained, trying to keep my tone steady. "We need to understand its purpose before it escalates." Sari's gaze shifted to Leo, seeking reassurance. "What should we do?" Leo stepped in, his authority reasserting itself. "We need to gather offerings, something meaningful that can appease the spirit," he declared. "We don't have much time." A wave of unease washed over me. What would we offer? And how could we ensure the spirit would be satisfied? I felt the enormity of the decision weighing on me, aware that every choice could have dire consequences. As we prepared to gather offerings, I spotted Mira approaching from the edge of the clearing. Her presence felt like a breath of fresh air, but there was something in her demeanor that suggested she understood more than she let on. "You're all foolish to think you can appease the spirit with trinkets," she said, her voice low and steady. "It demands respect, not offerings." "Then what do you suggest?" Leo shot back, the tension between them palpable. Mira looked at me, her eyes searching. "It's about understanding the spirit's pain, its anger. You must confront it, not hide behind rituals." Her words resonated deep within me. I had been so focused on appeasing the spirit that I had neglected the underlying truths it represented. The forest was suffering, and the spirit was its voice. Maybe we need to face the spirit directly, I suggested, feeling a surge of courage. We can't just throw offerings and hope for the best. Leo's face darkened, and he shook his head. That's reckless, Paulo. You don't understand what you're asking. Maybe that's exactly what I need to do, I insisted. We have to confront the truth of what's happening here. As the villagers murmured among themselves, I felt a shift in the air. The spirit was waiting, and I knew I couldn't delay any longer. The stakes were higher than I had initially grasped, and the consequences of my choices were unfolding with each passing moment. With newfound determination, I turned to the villagers. If anyone is willing to join me, we need to confront the spirit together. We can't hide from this any longer. Sari stepped forward, her expression resolute. I'll go with you. We need to stand together. One by one, others joined her until a small group had gathered, united by a shared purpose. I felt a surge of hope wash over me. Perhaps this was the path we needed to take, one forged in unity and understanding, rather than fear. As we approached the altar, I could feel the spirit's energy swirling around us, a palpable force that demanded our attention. I took a deep breath, prepared to face whatever awaited us, but just as we were about to confront the spirit, a loud crash echoed through the forest. A group of outsiders, hunters and loggers, burst into the clearing, their intentions unmistakable. They had come to exploit the chaos, to claim the forest for their own gain. "Step aside, rangers," one of them shouted, brandishing a weapon. "This land is ripe for the taking." Panic surged through the villagers, and I felt a rush of anger. This was not just about the spirit anymore. It was a battle for the very soul of the forest. I had to protect my home and the people I cared about. "Get behind me!" I yelled, positioning myself between the villagers and the intruders. "You won't take anything from here." And just like that, the conflict intensified, shifting from an internal struggle to an external battle for survival. The choices we made in this moment would determine not just our fates, but the fate of the forest itself. With the spirit watching, I knew the stakes had never been higher. I had to lead the charge, confront both the intruders and the spirit, and find a way to restore balance to the land that had been my home for so long. As the confrontation with the intruders escalated, memories began to flood my mind, echoes of lessons learned and warnings passed down through generations. I remembered sitting at my mother's feet as she recounted tales of the forest, her voice a soothing balm against the harshness of the world. "Monsters are not always what they seem," she would say, her eyes glinting with wisdom. "Sometimes they wear the faces of those we trust." At that moment, I realized how relevant her words were. Leo, whom I had looked up to as a protector, now stood beside me, but his intentions seemed shrouded in ambiguity. I couldn't help but wonder if he was as much a monster as the intruders threatening our home. My heart raced, not just from the impending danger, but from the weight of betrayal that loomed just beneath the surface. "Leo, you've always taught us to respect the forest, but now you're willing to sacrifice its spirit for control," I said, my voice rising above the chaos. "Is that truly what you want?" He hesitated, a flicker of conflict crossing his face. "I'm trying to protect you, Paulo. We're in a fight for survival." But his words felt hollow. The pressure of time was mounting. Each second that passed brought the intruders closer to claiming their prize. I had to resolve my internal conflict with Leo before we could face the external threat together. Meanwhile, Sari, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. If we don't confront the real monsters, we'll lose everything." Her voice was steady, and I could see her conviction inspiring others around us. The villagers murmured in agreement, sensing the urgency of the situation. It was clear that the heart of our struggle lay not just in the physical confrontation, but in the moral choices we faced as guardians of the forest. The spirit's awakening was a reflection of our internal struggles, and only by addressing them could we hope to succeed. As the intruders continued to advance, I felt a familiar presence beside me. Mira had joined the group, her expression serious. "The spirit is restless, and it won't tolerate this trespass. We need to act quickly," she urged, her voice calm yet insistent. I turned to her, grateful for her presence. "What do you suggest? How do we confront the spirit while also standing our ground against these intruders? We must find a way." "To unite our intentions," she replied, her eyes scanning the clearing. "If we can show the spirit that we are willing to protect the forest together, it may lend us its strength." Her words sparked a realization within me. The intruders were not just a threat, they were a manifestation of our fears, our collective struggle against exploitation and neglect. If we could confront them as a united front, we could simultaneously address the spirit's unrest. "Let's create a barrier," I proposed, feeling a surge of energy. "We can use the offerings we gathered to form a protective circle around the altar. It will symbolize our commitment to the forest and our willingness to confront whatever comes our way." Sari nodded, her determination evident. "I'll help. Gather the offerings. We need to make it meaningful." As we worked together, gathering items that represented our connection to the land, feathers, stones, and small tokens of gratitude, I felt a sense of purpose solidifying among us. Each item carried a story, a memory of the forest's beauty and strength. In the midst of our preparations, I caught a glimpse of Leo's face, still etched with uncertainty. "Paulo, you're asking us to take a risk," he said, his voice low. "What if it backfires?" I met his gaze, willing him to understand. "We have to take that risk. The true monster is the fear that divides us. If we let it control our actions, we've already lost." The urgency of the moment pressed down on us, and the intruders grew bolder, sensing our distraction. The pressure of time intensified as I realized we might not have much longer before they struck. I could see a glint of metal in their hands, tools of destruction, eager to carve into the heart of the forest. As we arranged the offerings in a circle around the altar, I felt the spirit's energy swirling in response. It was as if the very essence of the forest was urging us forward, pushing us to confront the darkness that threatened to engulf us. In a moment of clarity, I remembered my mother's words again. Monsters are often reflections of our fears. Could it be that the intruders were merely a physical manifestation of the internal struggles we all faced? It was time to confront not just the intruders, but the fears that had held us captive for too long. As the last offering was placed, I turned to the villagers. "We stand together, not just against these intruders, but against the fear that seeks to divide us. The spirit of the forest is with us. Let's show them our strength." With newfound resolve, we positioned ourselves in a line, ready to face the approaching threat. The intruders halted, momentarily taken aback by our united front. Their arrogance faltered as they realized we were no longer just a group of frightened villagers. We were protectors of the forest, willing to stand our ground. "Step aside, Rangers!" one of the intruders yelled, brandishing a weapon. "You don't know what you're up against." I stepped forward, standing taller than I ever had. "And you don't know what you're about to face. This forest is protected by those who understand its value. We will not let you destroy it." Just then, a rumble echoed through the ground, and the spirit manifested, a swirl of light and energy that enveloped the altar. The air crackled with power, and the intruders faltered, fear creeping into their eyes. They had underestimated the strength of our resolve and the spirit of the forest. With a flash of inspiration, I called out, "Let the spirit show you the consequences of your actions." As if responding to my plea, the spirit unleashed a wave of energy that rippled through the clearing. The ground shook, and the intruders stumbled back, their confidence shattered. They were confronted not just by us, but by the very essence of the forest they sought to exploit. In that moment, I saw Leo step forward, his face transformed. "You'll regret this," he shouted, but I could see the fear behind his bravado. "You're right, Leo," I said, my voice steady. "We will all regret it if we don't stand together." The pressure of time had culminated into this pivotal moment. The choices we made here would determine not just our survival, but the survival of the forest itself. With the spirit's energy guiding us, we pressed forward, standing united against the intruders. The culmination of our individual struggles and fears had transformed into a collective strength that no one could undermine. As the confrontation reached its climax, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The true battle was not just against the physical threat before us, but against the fears and doubts that had plagued us for too long. At that moment, I understood my mother's teachings more deeply than ever. We had the power to confront the monsters in our lives, whether they wore familiar faces or came in the guise of strangers. Together, we were unstoppable. As the confrontation intensified, the clearing transformed into a living entity, reflecting the turmoil within each of us. Shadows danced among the trees, stretching and contorting as if they were alive, echoing the uncertainty and fear that gripped my heart. The air felt charged, thick with tension, as if the very essence of the forest was holding its breath, waiting for a decisive moment. I stood at the center of the chaos, the altar looming behind me like a sentinel of ancient wisdom. The villagers, united and resolute, formed a protective barrier, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the spirit that hovered nearby. But just as we prepared to confront the intruders, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and sending a chill down my spine. It was then that I saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows, moving with a purpose that sent a jolt of recognition through me. It was Mira, but something was different. Her demeanor was transformed. There was an intensity in her eyes that I had never seen before. She stepped forward, her presence commanding and fierce. "Mira, what are you doing?" I called out, bewildered by her sudden boldness. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she raised her hand, and the spirit responded, swirling around her in a dance of light. The intruders hesitated, confusion etched on their faces. They had come prepared to fight, but now they seemed caught in a web of uncertainty spun by the very essence of the forest. "Mira, this isn't the time for theatrics," Leo shouted, his voice tinged with panic. But Mira's eyes were locked on me, as if she were trying to convey something profound without words. Suddenly, a realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. Mira was not just a healer, she was a vessel for the forest's energy. Her connection to the land ran deeper than any of us had understood. She had always known the forest's secrets, and now she was channeling them in a way that could shift the very course of our confrontation. As she opened her arms, the spirit surged forward, enveloping her in a radiant glow. I could feel the ground trembling beneath us, resonating with the power of the forest awakening in response to her call. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows deepened, heightening the sense of impending change. "Mira, what are you going to do?" I asked, my heart racing. "I'm going to show them the truth," she replied, her voice a steady whisper that cut through the chaos. "They need to understand what they're up against." In that moment, the clearing became a battleground, not just of physical strength, but of will and purpose. The intruders, emboldened moments before, now appeared uncertain, glancing at one another as if questioning their motives. The realization hit me. Our unity had transformed the atmosphere, and fear was beginning to seep into their ranks. Just as Mira began to speak, the intruders charged forward, their resolve faltering. "We can't let them intimidate us," one shouted, but his voice wavered. The spirit, responding to the collective energy of our determination, unleashed a wave of light that surged towards the intruders. In that instant, everything shifted. The clearing erupted into chaos as the intruders stumbled back, momentarily blinded by the brilliance. I could feel the weight of the forest's power coursing through me, and I knew we were on the precipice of a turning point. In the midst of the turmoil, I caught a glimpse of Leo's face. His expression was a mixture of awe and fear. The realization seemed to dawn on him as well. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said, his voice barely audible above the clamor. It's about the forest itself. The spirit, now fully manifesting through Mira, began to weave between the villagers and the intruders, creating a barrier of light that pulsated with energy. It was a powerful testament to our unity, a force that the intruders could no longer ignore. But just as I thought we might gain the upper hand, a shocking revelation struck me. One of the intruders, a man I had known from the village, stepped forward. It was Darius, a former ranger who had once fought alongside us. His betrayal cut deeper than any weapon could. "Darius, why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice laced with disbelief. "You were one of us." He smirked, the shadows casting a sinister look on his face. "You think you can save this place? You're all fools. There's no profit in protecting it. I'm here to claim what's rightfully mine." His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and I felt a wave of anger surge within me. This was not just a fight for the forest. It was a fight for our very identity as guardians. The realization that someone I had once trusted had turned against us ignited a fire in my heart. With the spirit's energy swirling around us, I looked to Mira, who nodded, her determination unwavering. "We need to show him the truth," she said, her voice steady, as the spirit surged forward, illuminating the clearing with its brilliance. I felt a profound shift within me. This was our moment, not just to confront the intruders, but to reclaim our purpose. We were not mere protectors of the forest. We were its voice, its defenders against those who sought to exploit it. "Step back, Darius," I warned, my heart pounding. "You don't understand what you're challenging. The forest won't let you take it without a fight." The air thickened with tension as Darius hesitated, uncertainty creeping into his bravado. Behind me, the villagers stood resolute, their faces reflecting the strength of our unity. Together, we embodied the spirit of the forest, and I could feel it resonating through every fiber of my being. As the confrontation reached its apex, I realized that this was not just a battle against those who threatened our home. It was a battle against the very fears that had held us captive for too long. The shadows that had danced around us were now a reflection of our inner struggles, and we had the power to overcome them. The turning point had arrived, and with it, the promise of a new beginning. As the radiant light of the spirit surged through the clearing, I felt an electric pulse course through my veins, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and my fingers trembled, so violently that I struggled to keep my grip on the branch I had picked up as a makeshift weapon. The power of the moment surged around us, and I could feel the very essence of the forest awakening, responding to our unity and determination. Darius's face twisted in disbelief, his bravado faltering as the spirit's light illuminated the clearing. The shadows that had once seemed so ominous now danced away, retreating from the brilliance of our resolve. I could see the doubt settling in his eyes, and it filled me with a sense of vindication. "Do you see now, Darius?" I shouted, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "This forest has a spirit, a will of its own. You can't conquer it." His smirk faded, replaced by an expression of confusion and fear. The intruders hesitated, glancing at one another, their confidence cracking like dry branches underfoot. The atmosphere around us shifted. The very air felt charged, filled with the energy of our collective defiance. I took a step forward, feeling the weight of every eye upon me. "You chose to turn against us, against the land that nurtured you. But it's not too late to change. Stand with us, or be swept away by the consequences of your actions." Darius looked back at the intruders, his face pale. "We can still take what we want. We just need to regroup," he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "No!" one of the other intruders shouted, suddenly breaking ranks. "I didn't sign up for this. We're not prepared to face whatever that is." He pointed at the spirit, panic flooding his features. The realization that they were outmatched began to sink in, and I could see the tide turning. In that instant, I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about defending the forest. It was about protecting the people I cared for, the very fabric of our community. My resolve solidified, and I turned back to the villagers, meeting their eyes one by one. "We don't fight for ourselves alone," I said, my voice rising above the chaos. "We fight for our ancestors, for the future of our children. Together, we can reclaim our home." The villagers responded, a chorus of agreement swelling around me. Sari stepped forward, her eyes ablaze with determination. "We've always lived in harmony with this land. Darius, you were one of us. Remember what we stood for?" Darius's expression wavered, caught between loyalty and ambition. "I thought I could have more," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But now, I see what I've lost." The spirit seemed to pulse in response, its light growing brighter, as if encouraging Darius to reconsider. The shadows that had once enveloped him now receded, revealing the vulnerability beneath his bravado. As the tension hung in the air, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps we could reach him. "It's not too late, Darius," I urged, stepping closer. "You can stand with us. Together, we can protect this place from those who seek to destroy it." But just as I thought we might sway him, the ground shook violently, a tremor that reverberated through our very souls. The spirit's energy surged, responding to the conflict around us. It was a reminder that the stakes were higher than ever, and we were running out of time. "Get away from them," Leo yelled, stepping forward to shield the villagers. His protective instincts kicked in, but I could see the fear in his eyes. It was clear that he felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him, and I could sense the conflict within him as well. "Leo, don't," I cried out, but it was too late. He was caught in the moment, driven by a mix of fear and a desire to protect us at all costs. The spirit reacted defensively, its light flickering as if sensing the tension between us. In that moment of chaos, I felt my heart race. The stakes were too high for hesitation. "We need to unite," I shouted, my voice breaking through the noise. "Darius, join us. We can't let fear dictate our actions." Time felt suspended as Darius wrestled with his choices. I could see the conflict playing out in his eyes, his memories of camaraderie and trust warring with his ambitions. The ground trembled again, and the air grew thick with anticipation. The villagers gathered closer, forming a circle of solidarity. I felt their strength flowing through me, a reminder that we were not alone in this fight. The forest had always thrived on connection between friends, family, and nature itself. "Remember the stories of our ancestors," I urged, my voice steady. "They fought for this land, for its spirit. We carry their legacy within us." Finally, Darius seemed to falter, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his decisions bore down on him. I don't want to fight anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to come home." A collective breath swept through the crowd, relief mingling with hope. The tension that had hung over us began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of possibility. The spirit pulsed gently, its light reflecting the unity that was beginning to form. As the intruders began to retreat, I felt a surge of triumph mixed with vulnerability. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness that had threatened to consume us, and emerged stronger. But the journey wasn't over yet. The forest still needed our protection, and the consequences of our choices would continue to unfold. I turned to Leo, who stood watching with a mix of pride and uncertainty. "We did it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Together." Nodded, a small smile breaking through his earlier tension. "Yes, but we have a long way to go. The spirit will require our dedication." The clearing, once a battleground, now felt alive with possibility. The spirit's energy enveloped us, reminding us of our connection to the land and to each other. As the intruders retreated, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. We had faced the monsters within and without, and we had emerged victorious. But I knew that our true challenge lay ahead, nurturing the bonds we had forged, and ensuring that the spirit of the forest would continue to thrive. As the dust settled in the clearing, a new calm enveloped us. The spirit's light faded gently, leaving behind a warm glow that felt like a promise. a promise of renewal and hope. I stood among the villagers, my heart still racing, but now filled with a sense of purpose. The battle had shifted, not just against the intruders, but within ourselves. In the aftermath, as we gathered to discuss our next steps, I felt an unfamiliar weight lift from my shoulders. It was a realization that I had not only fought for the forest, but had also confronted my own fears. I finally understood that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite it. Leo approached me, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "You led us well, Paulo. I may have underestimated your strength." His words stirred something within me. I glanced at the villagers, their faces reflecting relief and newfound determination. We had forged a bond in the face of adversity, and I could see that we were ready to rebuild. "We all played a part," I replied, my voice steady. "This is our home, and we must protect it together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing, I felt the weight of our responsibility settle in. The threat of the intruders had been repelled, but new challenges lay ahead. The forest needed healing, and so did our community. We worked tirelessly over the next few days, clearing debris, replanting trees, and restoring the altar that had been our focal point of power. Each task felt like a step toward redemption, not just for the forest, but for ourselves. I could feel the spirit of the land responding to our efforts, a gentle warmth enveloping us as we toiled. During this time, I noticed a change within myself. I was no longer the hesitant ranger, uncertain of his place. Each action I took, from leading the group in planting new saplings to sharing stories of our ancestors, reinforced my role as a protector. I felt a deep connection to the land, as if its pulse was intertwined with my own. One evening, as we gathered around a fire to share our experiences, I noticed Darius sitting quietly at the edge, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. He had rejoined us, albeit with a heavy heart. His betrayal still weighed on him, and I could sense his struggle to find his place among us. "Darius," I called softly, inviting him to join the circle. "We're all here to support each other." "You're one of us again." He hesitated, but the warmth of our gathering drew him closer. "I don't know if I deserve to be here after what I did," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, feeling the weight of his words. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we choose to move forward. As he sat down, I could see the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. In that moment, I realized that forgiveness was a powerful tool, one that could heal not just individuals, but the entire community. It was a lesson I had learned through our trials, a reminder that growth often stemmed from vulnerability. The days turned into weeks, and as we continued our efforts to restore the forest, new challenges emerged. A sudden storm swept through, uprooting trees and flooding parts of the clearing. The devastation felt like a blow to our hard-fought progress, but instead of despair, I felt a surge of determination. "Let's rebuild," I said, my voice cutting through the rain-soaked chaos. "We've faced worse together. We can do this." The villagers rallied, their spirits unbroken. We worked side by side, clearing debris and reinforcing our efforts to protect the forest. I felt a sense of unity that I had never experienced before, a bond forged in the fires of adversity. In the midst of our labor, I caught a glimpse of Leo, his face etched with determination. He was no longer the authoritative figure I had once looked up to blindly. Instead, he stood beside us as an equal, sharing in the sweat and toil. This evolution in our relationship marked a significant shift in how I viewed leadership. It was not about control, it was about collaboration. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself and in those around me. Darius took on a leadership role in organizing our restoration efforts, his past mistakes no longer defining him, but instead shaping his resolve to make things right. Sari emerged as a voice of encouragement, inspiring others when morale dipped. I found myself stepping into a mentor role, guiding new villagers who had joined our efforts. It was a subtle shift, but it felt profound. I was no longer just a protector. I was a teacher, sharing the wisdom I had gained through our shared struggles. One evening, as we gathered to reflect on our progress, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Look at what we've accomplished together," I said, my voice steady. "We've rebuilt not just the forest, but our community. This is what it means to protect what we love." The villagers nodded, their faces illuminated by the firelight, a testament to our hard work and commitment. I realized that we had grown not just as individuals, but as a collective, each of us contributing our strengths to a shared purpose. But just as I felt the warmth of our achievements, a new challenge emerged. News reached us of an impending development, project threatening the outskirts of the forest, an attempt to exploit the very land we had fought to protect. The urgency of the situation ignited a fire within me, a determination to rise once more. "We cannot let this happen," I declared, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. "We've come too far to turn back now." The villagers rallied around me, their resolve mirroring my own. We were no longer just protectors of the forest. We were advocates, ready to stand up against those who sought to undermine our home. As I looked around at the faces of my friends and allies, I felt a profound sense of belonging. Together, we had faced monsters both within and without, and we had emerged stronger. I understood now that growth was a journey, a continuous process of learning, adapting, and forging connections. With each challenge we faced, I felt myself evolving, becoming not just a guardian of the forest, but a steward of its spirit. The lessons I had learned would guide me as we prepared to confront this new threat. And in that moment, I realized that while the battles may change, the spirit of the forest would always endure as long as we remained united in our purpose. The Mo. News of the impending development project hit us like a thunderclap. In the days that followed, the atmosphere around the village shifted from one of renewal to a palpable tension. We had worked hard to restore the forest, only to face the threat of its destruction once more. Gathered in the clearing, I looked around at the determined faces of my friends and allies. We had become a family bound by our shared purpose, but now we were faced with a challenge that felt insurmountable. The stakes were higher than ever. "Tomorrow we meet with the developers," I announced, my voice steady but laced with urgency. "We need to make our case clear. This forest isn't just land. It's our home, our heritage." Leo nodded, his expression resolute. "We must prepare our arguments, gather evidence of the spirit's presence and the importance of this ecosystem. But more than that, we need to show them our unity." As we broke into smaller groups to strategize, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. We couldn't afford to falter now. In the midst of our preparations, I spotted Darius working diligently alongside Sari and Mira. They were collecting testimonials from villagers, documenting the history and significance of the forest. I felt a sense of pride as I watched him. He had truly transformed, channeling his past mistakes into a fervent desire to protect our home. "Darius," I called, approaching the trio, "you're doing incredible work. Your voice matters in this fight." He looked up, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Thanks, Paulo. I just want to make things right. This forest means everything to us." His sincerity struck a chord within me, and I realized how far we had all come. The fight was no longer just about the land. It was about redemption, integrity, and standing up for what we believed in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the clearing, we gathered for a final strategy meeting. The air crackled with energy, a sense of purpose binding us together. Each person shared their thoughts, and I felt the collective strength of our resolve. Just as we were wrapping up, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. It was a figure I recognized immediately, Mira. She stepped forward, her face serious. "I've heard whispers of what the developers are planning. They're not just looking to clear the land. They want to exploit the forest's resources, and they have connections in higher places. A murmur of concern rippled through the group. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "They're planning to use intimidation tactics to silence us," she replied, her voice resolute. "We must be prepared for anything." My mind raced. This was a twist I hadn't anticipated, a new layer to the conflict that threatened not only our home, but also our safety. "We need to gather more support," I said, urgency rising in my voice. "We can't let them divide us or scare us into submission." As we strategized, I felt a growing sense of dread. The developers' tactics could be ruthless, and I knew we had to stand firm. But beneath the surface, I felt something else, an ember of anger igniting within me. I was tired of being pushed around, tired of being seen as just a voice that could be silenced. The night deepened around us, the stars glinting like distant hopes. We finalized our plan, and as we prepared to disperse, a sense of unity enveloped us. We had each other's backs, and together we would face whatever came our way. The next morning we gathered at the edge of the forest, a line of determined faces ready to confront the developers. The sun rose behind us, illuminating the path ahead. I took a deep breath, feeling the spirit of the forest guiding me, urging me forward. As we approached the meeting site, my heart raced. The developers stood with their suits and arrogance, an imposing presence that threatened to overshadow our resolve. But we had something they didn't: passion, history, and a deep connection to the land. "Thank you for meeting with us," I began, stepping forward as the spokesperson for our group. "We are here to speak on behalf of the forest, to defend our home and the spirit that resides within it." The lead developer smirked, crossing his arms. "You're wasting your time. This land is ripe for development, and we have the permits to prove it." A wave of anger surged through me, but I couldn't let it show. Permits won't protect the ecosystem or the spirit that has thrived here for centuries. You may have the paperwork, but we have the truth on our side. The tension in the air thickened as I spoke. I could feel the eyes of the villagers on my back, their hope resting on my words. I needed to convey the urgency of our cause without faltering. "Listen," I continued, my voice rising. "This forest is more than just land. It's a living entity that has nurtured our community and countless species. Destroying it would not only harm our heritage, but also disrupt the balance of nature." The developers exchanged glances, their confidence wavering. But just as I felt a shift in the atmosphere, the lead developer's phone buzzed, breaking the momentary silence. He glanced at the screen, irritation flickering across his face. "Enough of this sentimental nonsense," he said dismissively, regaining his composure. "We'll be moving forward with our plans, regardless of your protests." It was then that I felt a rush of clarity. I realized the true enemy was not just the developers. It was the complacency we had almost succumbed to. We needed to show them that we wouldn't back down. Suddenly, a thought struck me like a lightning bolt. What if we turned their tactics against them? I proposed, drawing the attention of my friends. "We can use social media, gather public support, and expose their plans. We can make this a community movement." Sari's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes, we can organize rallies, reach out to environmental groups, and share our story far and wide." The developers looked increasingly uncomfortable, their facade cracking. I could sense their confidence faltering, and it fueled my determination. As we left the meeting, a mix of adrenaline and resolve coursed through me. We had shifted the narrative. We were no longer merely fighting against the development, but advocating for the forest's future. But just as we began to strategize our next steps, a chilling realization struck me. The true enemy was not just the developers, it was the looming threat of apathy among our own community. Would we have enough support to rally against them? I turned to my friends, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. We need to be prepared for anything. This fight is just beginning, and we must remain vigilant. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across our path. The battle ahead would be fierce, but I felt the spirit of the forest guiding us, reminding me that we were not alone. Together, we would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. The air buzzed with tension as we gathered outside the forest's edge, ready to face the developers once more. Our community had rallied behind us, a sea of faces determined to protect our home. Banners waved, and the sound of drums echoed through the trees, a rhythmic heartbeat of defiance. I stood at the forefront, my heart racing, knowing that this was our moment. "Today we make our stand," I shouted, the words fueled by the spirit of the forest that coursed through me. The developers arrived, flanked by security personnel who eyed us with disdain. Their arrogance was palpable, but we were undeterred. "We stand united," I called, raising my voice above the crowd. "This land belongs to us, to the spirit of the forest, and we will not let it be destroyed." Just then, a figure emerged from the crowd, Mira. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she stepped forward, a handful of petitions in her hand. "We've gathered thousands of signatures from people who believe in saving this forest," she declared, holding them high. The lead developer's expression darkened. "You think that will stop us? We have the law on our side." My pulse quickened. "But do you have the support of the community, the spirit of the forest?" I countered, glancing at the villagers around me. "This isn't just about permits. It's about our future." With that, the crowd erupted into chants, a powerful wave that echoed through the trees. The spirit seemed to respond, a gust of wind sweeping through the clearing, lifting our banners high. The developers shifted uncomfortably, the air thick with uncertainty. "Enough!" the lead developer barked, but his voice trembled. "This land will be developed, whether you like it or not." And then it happened. A deafening roar erupted from the forest, a sound that was both thunderous and ethereal. The spirit of the forest materialized before us, a swirling mass of light and energy. Gasps filled the air as the developers staggered back, their bravado evaporating. In that moment, everything shifted. I felt the forest pulse with energy, its spirit intertwining with our resolve. "You can't control what you don't understand," I shouted, feeling the power surge within me. "This forest is alive, and it will fight back." The lead developer stumbled, his confidence shattered. "What is happening?" he shouted, panic rising in his voice. The spirit surged forward, illuminating the clearing with an otherworldly glow. "This is our home," I declared, my voice rising above the chaos. "You cannot take it from us." As the spirit enveloped the developers, they were caught in a whirlwind of energy. Their eyes widened in terror as they realized the true power of the land they sought to exploit. The air was electric, and I felt a transformative rush as I channeled the spirit's energy through my own being. "Together, we will protect this forest," I cried, the words echoing through the clearing. The villagers rallied around me, their faces alight with determination. In a final surge of energy, the spirit pushed the developers back, forcing them to retreat into the shadows of the trees. The clearing erupted into cheers, a victory cry that reverberated through the forest. But as the dust settled, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. I had confronted the developers, but I also knew that the true battle was never just against them. It was a fight against complacency and the fear of losing our connection to the land. And then, in that moment of triumph, I realized something profound. The enemy I had fought was not simply the developers, it was the fear that had held me captive for so long. The fear of not being enough, of failing to protect what I loved. I had transformed in this battle, emerging not just as a protector of the forest, but as a voice for its spirit. As the last remnants of the developers faded into the distance, I stood there, breathless and exhilarated. I had survived, but I knew that the journey was far from over. The forest would always need guardians, and I was ready to embrace that role fully. In the days following the confrontation, the community rallied around the forest with renewed vigor. We organized cleanup efforts, educational programs, and partnerships with environmental organizations. The outpouring of support from the surrounding area transformed our fight into a movement, one that would resonate far beyond our small village. Darius emerged as a prominent figure in our initiatives, advocating for sustainable practices and helping to educate others about the importance of preserving our land. I saw him not just as a former rival, but as a vital ally in this ongoing struggle. The bonds we forged in battle had evolved into a shared commitment to protect the spirit of the forest. Sari became a leader in outreach, her passion igniting a flame in the hearts of many who had once been indifferent. Together, we held workshops and community events, sharing our experiences and emphasizing the importance of unity in the face of adversity. The developers, faced with mounting opposition, withdrew their plans. Their retreat felt like a victory not just for us, but for all. Those who believed in the sanctity of nature. The forest stood resilient, its spirit thriving as we continued our efforts to restore and protect it. As I walked through the woods, I felt a profound connection to the land and to those who had fought alongside me. The journey had not been without its scars, but each challenge had shaped me into a stronger guardian. I understood now that growth was not a destination. It was a continuous journey. The transformation I had undergone was only the beginning. With every step I took, I felt the pulse of the forest beneath my feet, a reminder of the responsibility I carried. The forest thrived, and so did our community. We had become stewards, committed to nurturing our connection to the land and to each other. The spirit of the forest was alive within us, guiding our actions and inspiring us to protect the world around us. Months later, as I stood at the edge of the forest, I marveled at how far we had come. The spirit lingered in the air, a constant reminder of our journey. The community had blossomed, each person playing a part in the forest's renewal. But as I looked toward the horizon, I wondered, what other challenges lay ahead, waiting just beyond the trees? Join us in this journey of connection and resilience. Reflect on your relationship with nature and consider what steps you can take to protect the world around you. Share your thoughts and engage with this story. Together, we can inspire change. And if you enjoyed this tale, click to explore the next story or video where we delve into the power of community and the magic of the natural world. Don't miss the chance to discover how you can be a part of something bigger.